Hello, everybody. My name is Spencer Walsh. Thank you so much for joining us today. On the show, we have some just-in breaking news for you today about the stimulus deal. President Trump has called in a statement just as his aides have left town, destroying the bill on the verge of being passed and pushed through by Congress because it does not have enough money. He demanded $2,000 stimulus checks, hinting he might not sign the relief bill without the changes, calling it a disgrace. Wow. Also, we'll take a look at the reasons behind the kind of pathetic New York Times groveling to the glory of the stimulus bill and why they proclaim it is good enough despite the fact that it so clearly isn't. Why are they lying to us, folks? We have to discuss it. Also, finally today on the show, we have a very, very interesting story in The Intercept about a Pentagon review initiated by the Trump administration to assess its relationship with the CIA, particularly as it pertains to one of the CIA's favorite things, their main reason for existing, which are those disastrous forever wars that we all know and hate so much. We have a packed show, one more focused and more complimentary than usual about Trump. It's Newsflash 461. Talking a lot about the stimulus today, folks. Welcome on in. All right, we start with this big breaking news just happening about an hour or half an hour or so ago. Donald Trump, guys, he's still the president. We still have to worry about him. He has pretty much been, I think it's hard to overstate the incredible amount of just, cutoff he was. He literally, he was the presidential equivalent of really during the worst stage of the pandemic, locking himself up in his room and just in this deep depressive phase. And we're kind of going through the Kubler-Ross stages of grief here, just going we can't be quite sure. We can't be quite sure about if I lost the election. It was stolen from me. I'm so sad. It was stolen. The fake news and the Democrats. Absolute meltdown and just complete absence of leadership. Not like it's been any better throughout the entire 4 years, but still, we just get absolutely nothing throughout the first throughout just any time from the administration, from the end of the election onwards until really he was declared the winner, because governance pretty much out of Capitol Hill stopped completely. Then we had some kind of brief kind of spark of activity in Congress that we know of, and that is, of course, the products that we talked about on the last show this past Sunday, which led to, of course, the creation of this stimulus deal that we all know and really do despise in such a strong way. So, so we're going to take a look at what he had to say on Tuesday night. He pretty much asked Congress to amend the $900 billion stimulus and spending bill passed by the Senate just one day before, describing the legislation as a disgrace and suggesting he would not immediately sign off on aid for millions of Americans. In a video posted to Twitter, Trump called on Congress to increase the ridiculously low $600 stimulus checks to $2,000, and outlined a list of provisions in the final legislation he described as wasteful spending and much more. He did not mention the idea that the $600 stimulus check idea came from his Treasury Secretary, Steve Mnuchin. Of course, there's a billion things you could criticize pretty much everyone involved in this for. You could criticize Mitch McConnell for being just grotesque and not providing the right amount of aid. You can criticize Trump for not pushing for this sooner. For example, in the lead up to the election, pushing for and actually being the leader of the party, actually getting up there on TV, talking to his fans and say, there's no reason why we should not have anything less than $2,000 in the stimulus. That, by the way, probably would have won him the damn election, and he wouldn't have been this position in the first place. Now we get this kind of weak, pathetic flop on the table that's probably going to be ignored, and enough people are going to talk to Trump and say that this good idea that he has is irrelevant and not going to happen, and it's probably not going to happen, and that's what we're going to. That's pretty much what we're going to have now, and we are really seeing this kind of collective covering by the mainstream media. And we'll talk about this, like this frontline piece in the Washington Post. He did not mention the $600 stimulus check idea came from his Treasury Justice Secretary Steve Mnuchin. Like, who cares where the idea came from? Like, I don't get the need to like ding Trump on the hypocrisy points for the fact that Steve Mnuchin and him said different things when he is clearly saying the right thing, and which is we need to give some more aid to some people during the middle of this global pandemic here. Yeah, so he has these kind of ridiculous, like, rattling off all these things. We don't even need to play it because we're going to be pretty much playing the reaction for you. We'll play a little snippet because he starts off, but he's whinging about, we provide aid to these countries, we provide aid to this country, we provide aid to Pakistan for education programs. But of course, he literally does not mention the $500 million because he's such a complete cuck for the Israeli lobby, just like every elected politician in Washington, that he refuses to mention at that time that, we're spending $500 million. We're spending $500 million alone in this bill, in a supposedly COVID relief bill, even after, again, we just sent millions and billions and tons, stacks of money their way in the defense budget we just passed. Forget about that. We got to send more $500 million in the COVID relief bill. We got to send that over as well for their Iron Dome program, again, in the middle of the pandemic. He refuses to mention that, but of course he's like, we're doing good things like actually funding some education in Pakistan. Like, that's the stuff we can't do. But provide Israel with the tools to completely erase Palestinians from the face of the earth. That's great. That's perfectly okay. We will not stop. We will never cease from that important goal anytime soon. All right, yeah, so here's what he said.
I am asking Congress to amend this bill and increase the ridiculously low $600 to $2,000, or
he would have won the election if he said this earlier. It's insane.
I'm also asking Congress to immediately get rid of the wasteful and unnecessary items from this legislation and to send me a suitable bill, or else the next administration will have to deliver a COVID relief package.
Yes, the 2020 campaign will, and we're gonna have to put that off there. So the video obviously landed like a sonic boom in Washington. No one really expected that this would happen because, of course, these negotiations have been going on already for weeks. Trump is pretty much, as I said before, he's been in his room kind of crying and really just refusing to accept the results of the election. I mean, his own aides were absolutely stunned. Congressional aides were stunned. They've been working on this for a while. Stock market futures quickly slumped on the prospect economic aid could be in doubt. And the implications for what happens next could be severe. If he refuses to sign the bill, the government will be shut down on December 29th. The $900 billion in emergency economic aid will be frozen, and the races for the 2 Senate seats in Georgia could also be upended. It's really kind of interesting to see like what the strategy is here, and you're going to see a huge upstart push by the media to see that, this is a bad thing, but this is a negative thing that Trump's doing. He's putting a lot of things at risk, which he is, but he's not doing it for a bad purpose here. He is doing it with the intended stated aim, and coming out probably at one of the worst times to do it, granted, but he is coming out and he is saying that this is not enough. Like, this is a disgrace, which, I mean, every American looking at this logically and rationally would agree with you that the amount of aid that's being actually earmarked for regular people in this is a disgrace and needs to change. He like, I don't care if you're a Democrat listening, he's awful, I hate him so much. Like, no, like, this is a clear fact that is obvious to a lot of Americans who actually sometimes have to put their economic circumstances before their politics. This aid that is in this bill is not enough, but it upends what Washington wants. This bill, this $900 billion stimulus, this is the perfect Washington bill. Why? Because it is just enough to keep people just barely above water with the psychological weight on their head that, we're really in trouble. We have to keep fighting. We're always on the edge here. We're like staving off economic desperation at pretty much any point. And that is pretty much they're really doing here the bare minimum. Like, that is all this is. That is what Washington wants in this scenario. I mean, I'm not saying that Trump is some brave populist fighter for the people. Like, who knows what he wants? He only wants what's best for himself. Like, we all know that. He only wants what's best for himself. He's making this calculation for whatever reason, maybe just to piss people off he doesn't like, maybe because he actually thinks it will maybe help him in the Georgia election. I mean, no one really knows. But what he is doing here is a good thing. If the government is shut down for a day, but then there are $2,000 stimulus checks because Mitch McConnell and the Republicans cave and support this bill, and checks are added, that is a good outcome. If that bill is not signed right away, and if there's not a deal that's reached right away, then that is a but we still end up with the $2,000 stimulus checks maybe after 1 or 2 days of the government being shut down, like and the bill is passed. Like, I don't. That is a unequivocally good thing. So, yeah. So, and here's what we see: a very, very interesting dynamic here. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi of California quickly responded to the Twitter post by saying congressional Democrats would enthusiastically return to the Capitol on Thursday and seek to advance a bill that adds $2,000 stimulus checks. Republicans refused to say what amount the president wanted for direct checks. And this, yeah, by the way, this charade about direct checks, what Trump wanted, what he didn't, what Republicans were trying to cover, this has been going on for an incredibly long period of time. And now that Trump's actually came out and said it, it's going to be very nice. Like, it is going to be very nice. At last, the president, she says, has agreed to $2,000. Something, by the way, they could have had if Pelosi hadn't rejected it before the election to make herself and Biden look good. Yeah, Democrats are ready to bring this to the floor this week by unanimous consent. Let's do it. So, good sign there. Chuck Schumer wrote on Twitter Tuesday night that he supported the idea of larger stimulus checks, but also blamed Republicans for preventing these checks from being included in the bill. And by the way, there's a lot of factions in the Republican Party that actually are to blame for this. They don't want to see more spending. They just want to see the most libertarian, cruel, cold, laissez-faire response to this, which is just hands off, and people can figure out where they want. That comes to government aid, it comes to economic aid, and also comes to, by the way, coronavirus restrictions. Like, that's why there was such an anti-masker, anti-restriction string running through the Republican Party, because they didn't want to have to pay for the lockdowns. They did not want to have to pay for them. And they happened anyway, and this created this whole patchwork of BS that we have running through the American COVID response. Yeah, so Schumer writes, we spent months trying to secure $2,000 checks, but Republicans blocked it. Trump needs to sign the bill to help people and keep the government open, and we're glad to pass more aid Americans need. Maybe Trump can finally make himself useful and get the Republicans to not block it again. And yet, that's what he's been doing. He's been completely isolated from this process, because he's just, whether it's been pouting about the election, whether it's been being sidelined by more ideologically driven, smarter, savvier people in his party, he's been completely isolated from this response. So it's going to be interesting to see if he can actually put some pressure on these Republican lawmakers over the next couple of days here, and what's sure to be a very kinetic situation. He will definitely... I mean, this is the test. This is the test where you can see whether Trump's influence on the Republican Party will force them to do this. Because the Democrats, from what I can see here, they seem to be for it. They seem to be ready for it. And if they're able to do this, it could be a very, very big win. So logistically, though, it could prove very difficult for the Democrats and Trump to amend the bill and approve $2,000 checks in the next few days or even the next few weeks. If any Republican in the House opposed Pelosi's effort on Thursday, it would not pass, and such a change would also require Senate Republicans to pass the measure unanimously as well, something that is still unlikely to happen. Several White House aides spoke on the condition of anonymity, described the chaotic and secretive process that unfolded Monday and Tuesday, and many of them were kept in the dark about Trump's motives and this video in the first place. So this really just ridiculous 5,593-page bipartisan bill that was introduced Monday and passed the House and the Senate later that evening. It was introduced again, keep in mind, at 2 p.m. and passed later that night. And they're just easily breezed through 5,000 pages there. Great. Yeah, totally. It passed Congress with broad bipartisan support, clearing the Senate 92-6. The Republicans had insisted on keeping the economic relief portion at least less than $1 trillion, and larger checks would have pushed that final tally higher. And it's not really like they're not worried about this electorally. They just think ideologically, they're just literally not for it. Like that is that's the current of people's brains running through a large part of the Republican psyche is it is wrong and it is bad policy. It is bad praxis, whatever, if you want to use that kind of stupid word.